off limits, man. Whoa. Okay, calm down.
Let's say like we had leaders who actually cared about Ukrainian agency, right? What would they be doing? What would the president be doing?
Oh, I just want to say one thing before Lev. I'm taking away Lev's Ukrainian agency.
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Butting in.
No, please. No, I'm done. I'm done.
No, I just wanted to say to that specific question. In 2019, Ukraine held an election for president. And the winner, Ukrainians themselves, and this is even after having the most pro-Russian parts cut out of the electorate, that is Crimea and Eastern Donbass. Nevertheless, they were so fed up and disgusted with the Ukrainian nationalism, with the war, with the regime that was constantly, you know, for ethnonationalism and all this stuff. Yeah. And of course, all the corruption and the repression that this regime, the Poroshenko, the first Maidan regime, represented, that they were so desperate for something better and else that they voted overwhelmingly, 75%. This has never happened in Ukraine, for a Jew, a Jewish comedian with zero experience in one of the most historically, I don't know what Ukraine's anti-Semitism levels are like now, but if you looked, you know, certainly until recently in a book for like a picture of the country with anti-Semitism issues, it's Ukraine. That's where the pogrom person.
I'll tell you this: Poroshenko, whom Zelensky beat, like 6 years before, Poroshenko actually had to meet with one of the rabbis of Ukraine to testify that he's not Jewish, because he was he was so afraid that people. It's a common mudslinging tactic to say, "Oh, you're secretly Jewish."
Yes.
So the guy who 6 years ago had to actually say, I'm not Jewish, and who was so scared, lost to a guy who was proudly Jewish.
Yes.
So that's
right. That was a criticism, I remember, of Poroshenko by nationalists. They would say his real name is like, you know, Edelstein or whatever bullshit they come up with, you know.
Waltzman.
So a Jew beats him, and what was his platform? Peace with Russia, end of war, end of ethno-nationalism. And before he even takes office, a collection of the most powerful so-called civil society groups, almost all of them funded by US aid or EU or both, and Soros, issued an open threat to Zelensky. If you do, and they listed all their red lines, which all had to do with bringing peace in the Donbass that he was voted for.
He was voted for.
Yeah. If you do any of these things, there will be another Maidan.
And the nationalists put it even more. Once again, I appreciate the quiet part loud. They said, if you do this, you'll be swinging from the nearest trees.
Yeah.
So what needs to happen now? What will happen? I mean, if
they
you
need
were,
democracy.
Yeah, I know it. Like but
nothing would help more than democracy.
Let's say you were president for a day. What would you do? Not for a day. Let's say you would do that for Zelensky. But what would you do if you were president of the United States? What would you do if you cared about the Ukrainians?
That's a tough one. Flee. I wouldn't want to be president of the United States. No, I mean, look, what would I do? Like dismantle the empire and introduce socialism and do all these things that would, you know, lead to my assassination.
Now you're never going to get elected.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, you know, I guess your larger question is sort of what could be done? Yes, what is to be or what could be done for Ukraine at this point. I mean, all you can do, if you ask me, dealing with the realities. And Ukraine is just of all of the forces with agency, Ukraine, as we've seen very clearly, has next to zero agency. They have a bit of agency because they could not listen and be totally kind of suicidal. And that there's a historical precedent for that with Ukraine. You know, it is possible. They're not easily, you know, totally controlled in that way. But nevertheless, they have very, very little agency. And ultimately, even the Europeans also, despite, you know, this union and everything, have very little agency. Everybody, you know, what Trump did was he just showed all of the agency, all of it is with America. Who gets into NATO and who doesn't? We had to pretend, well, we can't tell Ukraine what. Yes, we do. We decide. Washington decides who gets into NATO. Washington decides if it's even an issue, if you can even talk about getting into NATO. Washington decides that. Washington decides if they're going to back up the Europeans in a peace deal in a peacekeeping mission. And if Washington doesn't, Europe has nothing at all. Empire is now completely with, you know, or I take that back. empire, a lot of the empire faction is really with the Democratic Party. And certainly for the Democratic Party, the empire means everything politically. And this is, you know, Ukraine is a victim of this. Ukraine is a victim of American intrafactional fighting, you know, and so all of the agency, and this is, you know, everybody's fault. Everybody's, to the extent that they had any agency, it's all their fault for putting all their eggs in the empire's basket. Because
poor Ukraine.
Yeah, poor Ukraine, man. And so like Ukraine is screwed, and the best thing that could happen for them is peace at any cost at this point. And frankly, when you read even nationalist Telegram channels, even like neo-Nazi Ukrainian Azov ones and Tales from the Fourth Reich and some of these other ones, they all say like, we have to have a ceasefire. It's over. Like, we need a ceasefire. And it's only the grant feeders who want to keep this going. And
the neo-Nazis are like the voices of reason.
But let me just say this: I guarantee you that they know what needs to be done, which is a ceasefire. But the minute there is a ceasefire, all fucking hell is going to break loose.
Oh yeah,
they would love nothing more than a Jew. Yeah, and they would love nothing more than a Jew to take responsibility for us.
Oh, you couldn't ask for a happier ending.
Exactly.
At least somebody will be happy.
Oh my gosh! Wow. Well, I would love to end this conversation on a positive note. I don't know if there is one, except I guess for Lev, the silver lining is that they're saying the quiet part out loud. Maybe.
You know what? It's how you start everything. You have to stop lying. You have to be honest about what you're doing.
Yeah, it's like,
and also another piece of good news is I love talking with you guys.
Oh yeah, And what do they say? Like, the first step to recovery is like acknowledging there's a problem.
Yeah,
it doesn't totally work, but there's some parallel there. I'm not sure. We'll have to work it out next time. Yeah. Well, where can people find you and your work?
Well, I'm at Radio Warner, patreon.com/Radio Warner.
Yeah, great show.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'm here and there and everywhere.
And I really encourage people who disagree with, although they're probably not watching my show right now, but people who disagree with Mark and Lev should really listen to what they're saying and look at all the amazing analysis that they've done, because they will say things that are inconvenient and you may not be comfortable with it, but they really know what they're talking about and they predict a lot of this stuff. So I always love talking to you both because you have such good perspectives on what's happening. And you guys actually have, unlike a lot of so-called journalists, you have some actual knowledge and experience, having one of you, obviously, coming from Ukraine, the other one having spent much time in Russia. It's exciting to have people speak about this who, not that experience per se gives you authority, but it is nice to have people who happen to have very good analysis and insight and also actually know what they're talking about. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.